Okay, aloha everybody. Welcome to the Mālama Pūpūkea-Waimea monthly Zoom series. And this month is all about LIMU. And we're really excited to share not only just sort of LIMU 101 with you, but also talk about the diversity and abundance of LIMU here in the Pūpūkea Marine Life Conservation District. And so we actually wanted to start off today, have a guest in here with us today, and her name is Malia Heimuli. And Malia is working with Kuaina Ulu Awamo as the LIMU Hui director. And so Malia, go ahead and take it away.
Mahalo, Jenny. Mahalo for having me. Yes, I work with Kuaina Ulu Awamo. I am the LIMU Hui coordinator. And the LIMU Hui is a network of LIMU practitioners and LIMU Lo'ea or masters that are found all over the Pai'aina here in Hawaii. So all our different, our island chain. And so this year, we actually, well, last year, we put in a resolution to have 2022 proclaimed as the year of the LIMU. And so as we came into this year, we finally had our proclamation declared and by Governor David Ige, and officially now through the state, it is Year of the LIMU. So what is Year of the LIMU? What the intention behind Year of the LIMU was to spread awareness of LIMU as this important part of our Hawaii marine ecosystems. Even though if you look at LIMU, look up the definition of LIMU, it describes different, not just marine algae, but also algae that is freshwater algae, mosses, lichens. But this year we wanted to highlight our marine algae and the importance of our marine algae or seaweeds to our marine environments here in Hawaii. And so what we were trying to do is trying to create awareness and also highlight the knowledge of a lot of folks that maybe aren't in the limelight, who have a lot of knowledge, people who touch algae, who want to spread this awareness of its importance. So how are we celebrating Year of the LIMU this year? So next slide. What we want to do this year is we're having community LIMU events. So that means we are doing LIMU education. We're educating folks by going on LIMU walks. We're having what Uncle Wally and Uncle Henry would call show and tells. So we're gonna bring LIMU out to different community events so that people can look and touch, maybe even taste LIMU and kind of experience it more through the senses. We're going to have community work days where people can come out and they can do LIMU, invasive LIMU eradication. So like gathering invasive LIMU, taking it out of our marine ecosystems. We're also doing like educational events that people can go and walk the shorelines and look at LIMU and ask questions about it, observe kilo. We're also doing other events where people can talk story and just share LIMU education with others. And actually, if anybody, this may be late notice, but we also are having a LIMU table out at Vai Vai Collective in Honolulu. And we're going to be talking about LIMU and having a show and tell where people can come out and look at LIMU and talk to Uncle Wally and other LIMU practitioners and nerd out on LIMU. So if you're available, it's at 5 p.m. tonight. You can come on down and you can talk story. I'll be there as well. So Year of the Limu, if you would like to, I think I put in the chat, if you would like to learn more, I have links to our website, Kua Aina Uluawamu. We have a Year of the Limu website with upcoming events throughout the year, and it's a year-long initiative. So you can either follow us on social media or you can go to our website and find out more information. But thank you so much for your time, and Eola Limu. Mahalo.
Oh, mahalo so much, Malia. Yeah, we are so excited about Year of the Limu and really appreciate you making the time to come in today and share with all of us about the exciting things that are going to be going on all throughout the year to celebrate Limu. So make sure you folks follow up with Malia and check it out. And we hope to see you at some of those exciting events. Mālama Pūpūkea-Waimea will be also doing some things throughout the year. So we'll make sure that whenever there's opportunities for you, we'll share the Limu Hui stuff out with everybody. So mahalo nui, Malia. Okay, so we're going to spend the rest of our time today talking about Limu. And, we get a lot of feedback from folks that, what exactly is Limu? We're not 100% sure, or how does it grow, or what does it need, or what's the benefits of Limu, or what Limu can we eat, right? That's what everybody really wants to know, is what Limu can we put in our mouth? And so we're going to spend some time talking about that today. So we always like to start with this olelo no eo, ka ia lauoho loloa o ke kai, the long-haired fish of the sea. And of course, we were talking about limu in that sense. That's another way to describe limu in the ocean. Malia mentioned Uncle Wally, and so this is actually Uncle Wally, and this is out on the reef flat that we have here in our area. And like Malia mentioned, limu is more than just seaweed. So we'd like to put the definition here for everybody. So limu is the general name for all kinds of plants living underwater, both fresh, so also algae growing in any damp place in the air, as on the ground, on rocks, and on other plants, also mosses, liverworts, and lichens. So it really is a very broad understanding of these types of plants. Today, we're going to focus on the ones that do grow in the ocean today. But before we can do that, I'm the kind of person that I need to go back and understand the entire system. So we're going to go all the way back to plankton, you guys. So plankton is this microscopic life forms in the ocean, and there's two kinds. There's zooplankton, which are the little animals, and there's phytoplankton, which are the little plants. And so we're going to talk about the zooplankton, the tiny animals, for a second. And there's two kinds of those. The first kind is the kind that stay plankton forever. So zooplankton, these tiny little animals, come in two different forms, and one of which is called a holoplankton. And that holoplankton is always going to stay plankton. He's never going to grow up to be something bigger. That's the second type that we're going to talk about in a second. But this type, for example, would be a copepod. And so we like to have fun a lot with marine science. And so just put it out there. Does this look familiar to anybody? Does this copepod ring a bell? I think some of you might recognize this guy. And if you do recognize this guy from SpongeBob, he is actually based on a real guy called a copepod, which is a holoplankton, or a type of plankton that will stay a plankton forever. So little animals in the ocean. And then we have the kind of plankton that are the babies of something. They're going to grow up to be something bigger, larva in a sense. And so they're only plankton for a little while. So here's an example. Any guesses of what this guy might grow up to be? Any guesses? Let me open my chat so I can see if anybody has any guesses, or you can unmute yourself. We're not a huge group in here today. Any guesses? No cheating if you already know the answer. No cheating. Okay, so I'll just tell you, this guy is going to be a starfish. Okay, awesome. So another type of a plankton that is a baby and is going to grow up to be something else is this little guy called a zoea. Any guesses what this guy's going to grow up to be? Any guesses? Okay, you guys are a quiet group, but that's okay. I'll tell you, he's going to be a crab. They're the cutest little things. And so anyway, I show you that because it's important to understand kind of when we talk about food chain and all of that, this is going to make sense. So we talked about the tiny animals, the zooplankton, the kind that stay plankton forever, and the kind that are just a temporary plankton. So what do these guys eat besides each other sometimes? Well, they're going to eat phytoplankton. So over here, we have the other category of plankton, which are these plants, these tiny microscopic plants that live inside the ocean. So in order for us to really understand those, we need to look a little bit deeper. So phytoplankton or microscopic algae is like a plant that's on the land in the sense that it uses sunlight to create energy through a process called photosynthesis. So if you think about it, about 75% of our ocean, of our planet is covered in ocean, which means that about 75% of the oxygen that we breathe is actually coming from the plants in the ocean. So LIMU is not only cool for a million reasons, but it's also really cool because hello, oxygen that we breathe to stay alive. It's also the basis of the food chain in the ocean, like we talked about. And so these are some pictures that we've actually taken ourselves, these two here, looking at just water samples from on the reef. And so there's different types of different phytoplanktons in here. And so this one down here is one that we want to talk. I did not take this photo, just full disclosure, this is not my photo. But this one we want to talk about. This one is a particularly important type of LIMU for our reefs and for the marine ecosystem in general. And in order to talk about that one, we have to back up and talk about coral. So you might have learned that coral is actually three things in one. It is an animal. And so that animal is very tiny, about the size of a sesame seed, you could say. It's not so small that you can't see it. You can absolutely see it with your naked eye, but it's really little. And it is a cnidarian, meaning that it's related to jellyfish, sea anemones, zoanthids, hydroids. It basically is an animal in the ocean that has stinging tentacles. So you can think of it like a little mini upside down jellyfish. And so it uses those tentacles to catch prey. What is it catching? That zooplankton that we just learned about, those itty bitty little animals. And so he's zapping those with his stinging tentacles, puts it in here to his mouth, and it goes down here into his stomach. That's basically the form of the animal there. Tentacles, mouth, stomach, okay? So when it does eat and it's catching plankton and it's feeding itself, it's actually only gaining about 10%. So keep that number in mind, 10% of the energy that it needs to grow and reproduce. So the second part of coral that we know about is the hard part, and the hard part that makes it, what we see, what we think coral is. Each polyp itself secretes a hard exoskeleton. It's made up of calcium carbonate, and it grows very slow, but it does grow about 1 to 2 inches per year. And just FYI, in Hawaii, it is actually illegal to take coral rubble, like what you see here, off of our beaches, because it does break down and become sand. Sand is also illegal to take. But when you look really closely at a piece of coral, each one of those pukas left behind in a coral skeleton is where one of those polyp animals used to live. And so I don't know if you've ever been to the beach and you've looked at a piece of coral really close, but that's kind of what's left behind. And so finally, the other important part of coral is that it is a plant. And so that plant that we're talking about, you'll see this picture here again, okay? The coral animal has a symbiotic or a mutual relationship with a microscopic LIMU called zooxanthellae. And it lives inside the coral tissue and the tentacles. What's cool about it is, remember, it's a plant, it uses photosynthesis to make energy, and it actually provides the coral with the other 90% of the energy it needs to grow and reproduce. How amazing is that? Thank you very much, zooxanthellae. You're the most epic friend ever, okay? And in addition, it also, this algae, this killer LIMU in here, actually provides the coral with its color. So if it's like a yellow LIMU in there, then it's a yellow coral, blue, and so on. And so this all sounds really amazing. This coral animal is getting all these benefits from this tiny microscopic LIMU. But what does the algae get? What does zooxanthellae get back in return? Well, if you remember, we kind of talked about how the body of a coral polyp is tentacle, mouth, stomach. What you're not noticing down here is an exit. And really what happens is the mouth kind of doubles as an in and an out. And what happens is when these tentacles are catching those little animals, those zooplankton, it gets digested in the stomach. The waste is then released back this way, and that algae is able to essentially absorb those nutrients. So it's kind of like fertilizer. So that's what Zoe's getting. So here's a close-up picture. I did not take this photo either. This is one that we just, all of us that deal with teaching coral as educators love to use this photo from one of the NOAA labs. But it's a close-up of one single coral polyp. So this is the mouth here. And these are the tentacles. And what you're seeing, all those little yellow dots, is that LIMU, that microscopic algae that lives in that coral's tentacles. So yellow, I think, in this instance. Awesome. So we come back here to this picture where we talked about plankton, the two types of animal plankton, and we talked about the phytoplankton and how these guys are all related. So what we're going to do now is we're going to move down here, and instead of talking about micro or very tiny algae, we're going to talk about macroalgae, and that's the LIMU that we see when we go outside to the beach and walk around on our reefs. And so we always want to start with the source of where this LIMU knowledge comes from. And we need to acknowledge, of course, Dr. Isabella Abbott. And Dr. Abbott, there's a little blurb down here, you can read about her, but she's really responsible for so much of the documentation of LIMU that we know. If you see up here in this image, there's a bunch of the resources that we all continue to use today, and her name is on all of those. And what's cool about her is she was the first Native Hawaiian woman to receive a PhD in science. It happened to be in phycology. And she has discovered over 200 LIMU species and has basically helped, like I said, write all of the resources. And not just for Hawaii, actually a lot to do on the West Coast as well. And so we just want to honor her. I never actually learned from Dr. Abbott directly. But we do have folks in our LIMU hui who sure have. And so we do get to benefit from that a little bit. But I also want to acknowledge my kumu, who I have had direct learning time with. And so the first one here in the center, this is Uncle Henry Chang Wo. I know Malia mentioned him earlier. Uncle Henry was really the person who got me started with my love for LIMU. And I've been very blessed to walk the shorelines on just about every island with Uncle Henry and learn about LIMU and follow him around and really just not only learn about LIMU itself, but the why about LIMU. You know, why do we love LIMU? Why is LIMU important in the ecosystem? Why is it important for us to keep our ecosystems healthy so that LIMU will thrive? So all of that love comes from Uncle Henry. In addition, we have Uncle Mac Poi Poi over here. He's from the island of Molokai. He's also one of my great LIMU kumu. And then over here on the right, Uncle Wally Ito. And Uncle Wally used to work with Uncle Henry. Uncle Henry's passed on now, but Uncle Wally continues Uncle Henry's work and helped form the LIMU hui and is really the driving force between so many of us today, learning LIMU and loving LIMU and being a bunch of LIMU nerds. So mahalo to my kubu. Okay, so let's talk about LIMU. LIMU, all right. So as we talked about, it's the basis of the food chain. And now you understand, you get it all the way down to that very microscopic algae that the plankton eats. So, and coral gives life to coral. So basis of the food chain. It is a habitat for many marine creatures, meaning that little things live in and amongst the LIMU. And it's also an indicator of a healthy ecosystem. And so we're not going to spend a lot of time on it in this presentation, but LIMU needs healthy water. It needs clean water. It needs streams, and it needs springs, and it needs things that aren't polluted that end up in the ocean. So places that are high in development, high in runoff, high in pollution are not areas that are conducive to healthy LIMU growth. And sometimes you can look at the health of LIMU to determine how healthy the land above it is or isn't. And so that's what we mean by a healthy ecosystem indicator. In addition, the presence or absence of certain LIMU can let you know that there's an issue going on with balance or other things within a marine ecosystem as well. You can have too much LIMU, and we'll talk about that in a little while. Like we mentioned earlier, gives us about 75% of the oxygen we breathe. So yes, that's awesome. Also, LIMU is food. And so not only food for us, but food for marine life as well. We'll talk about a little bit of it being a food for marine life, but for us as humans, we do rely on limu for food. It's an important source of fiber and nutrients. We use it to flavor our food, also thicken our food. Probably those of you who brushed your teeth this morning, you probably consumed limu and didn't know it. So there's actually an ingredient that comes from limu that is in most toothpaste. Also ice cream, if you didn't know, has limu in it. We can go into that later in our answers and questions. Limu is also very important medicinally. It's rich in vitamins and minerals such as vitamin A, vitamin C, iron, iodine, potassium. It is known to reduce inflammation and increase immunity. It's also used topically to treat wounds, swelling, rashes, things of that sort, and much, much more. The things that we're mentioning here are just sort of the tip of the iceberg. This is very just general surface information for you. Just know that it does get much, much deeper and much, much more specific. And you can actually find a ton of information just by Googling, like medical benefits of limu or of algae, marine algae, and you'll get all sorts of information. And then also very important here in Hawaii, especially, is it is very important for ceremony. Two examples among many examples, but two examples would be a conflict resolution ceremony called ho'oponopono, where limu kala is used, and also in different offerings and such to ensure protection, whether that be for navigation or for fishers in different ways. There's many different ways, but limu is used as protection as well. So all sorts of things. When we get into the nitty gritty of limu, there's actually over 500 species in Hawaii, and that's a lot. I probably know I can identify about 30 just by looking at them. Imagine 500. Oh my gosh, that's so much to learn. And just so you guys know, I showed you some resources earlier, and I'll show you this one now. This is one of the books that we love to use as a limu resource. And when you start to get into limu, something you'll learn really quickly is that in these books, the limu is divided by its pigmentation color. And so this is a little sciencey, but I'm going to break it down for you guys who are not into phycology, like I wasn't when I started learning this. And so the main groups that they're divided into based on their pigmentation is red, green, brown, and blue-green. Okay, so we're going to do a little test down here by looking at these, and we're going to guess. So this first one here on the far left on the bottom, which of those four categories do you think that this one goes into? I'm looking at the chat. I'm seeing, oh, good. Yeah, put your guess in there. Lots of green guesses. Oh, thanks, Kirk. I saw your message there. Chee-hoo, yay. Milo CBSFA approved to go to public hearing. That's exciting. Okay, everybody guessing green. Good guess, except it's red. Okay. Good guesses. Let's try again. Okay. This one right here, the second one in, right here. What's your guesses? Come on, play the game. This is such a good, yeah, blue, green, good guess. Green, good guess. Blue, green, good guess. All good guesses. Awesome, okay. It's actually brown. Okay, let's try again. On a hole, one more time. Okay. Okay, this one, right here. The third one, what's this one? Okay, you guys are looking over at the list and you're going, wait, yellow is not a choice, right? Yellow is not a choice. Okay, green. Okay, I would have tried to put yellow. Green, good guesses. Okay, I'm gonna give you the answer. It's red. What is happening? Okay, last one. Right here. Okay, right here, this one, last one. Okay, brown, it looks pretty brown. You guys are doing awesome guessing, by the way. Okay, blue, green. Just go for the one that is the most far-fetched, right? Okay, here we go. The answer is, it was a trick question. this LIMU right here is actually the same LIMU as this one right here. So it's red. Okay, so let me explain the reason that I did this. The reason I did this is because it's not always about what it actually looks like. And this is just a funny thing that when you're learning LIMU that you kind of have to get used to. The pigmentation is sometimes you have to look at the very bottom of the LIMU or even use a microscope to look at the LIMU. And so as you're learning, you'll get to know how to identify these. But this red one here, if you were to sort of crack this little bunch open and look way down at the bottom, you would see that it's actually really red down there. Same with this one. This one right here, this is aki, this LIMU down here. And it actually will change color depending on how much sunlight it gets. So the ones in the cracks will be visually a different color than the one that's more exposed to bright sunlight. So that was just a little thing to confuse you and let you know that as you go and you learn, these books are divided by the LIMU color, but it's not always exactly what you see. So thank you for having a little fun with me with that. Okay, so let's talk about the parts of LIMU because this is the part that's really, really important. We compare LIMU to land plants, but they're actually much different. And so let's go over them now. So when we talk about the entire thing, in LIMU talk, this is the thallus. And Olelo Hawaii would be the la'au a'ole, okay, the whole thing. And then one individual, what we would call in a land plant, a leaf, is actually called a blade or a lau. Okay, so one blade. And then sometimes on the blades, you'll see these little dots, kind of like when you look at lawa'e fern and you see those little dots on lawa'e ferns. LIMU can reproduce just like a lawa'e fern in that it gets these little spore spots, and we call those cystocarps or pu'u. And those are the little spots that will release spores. So when you get down here, you have this part of the LIMU, which on a plant we might call the stem, but in LIMU we call it the stipe or the ha. And sometimes on the stipe, you might see these balls. And those round balls are actually gas bladders. They're areas that are filled with air. We know those to be like flotation devices. And so those actually, because it's an underwater plant and it needs sunlight, a lot of LIMU have developed these gas bladders to help hold the plant upright to where it's more close to the sun and getting more of the sun. You know, we mentioned earlier that there are certain LIMU that are used for different ceremonial purposes. And LIMU kala in particular has a lot of those gas bladders on it. And there's actually stories about how in traditional Hawaiian times, when someone was voyaging or a fisher was in trouble or maybe went overboard out of their canoe, that the Hawaiian goddess of fishermen would send floats made out of LIMU kala to help keep that fisher above water. And so you can kind of get the idea of what these floats do. They really are buoyant. Okay, and then the last thing down here we want to talk about is this bottom part. And in a land plant, we might know that as the roots, but in LIMU actually do not have roots. In a land plant, the roots absorb nutrients and moisture from the soil. At the bottom of a LIMU, of a seaweed, it doesn't have roots that do that. What we have instead is a holdfast. And you can think of the holdfast as like an anchor or a grip that holds the LIMU to the surface. So it doesn't absorb nutrients, but it does keep the LIMU in place. So we want to talk about that a little bit more. Now, this is an image here of the holdfast of a LIMU called kelp, and we don't have this one here, but the picture is so good that I use it in this presentation just because it's just so easy to see. And so as you can see here, it's literally like little hands gripping to the rock, to the substrate there. And so something that's very important, and we'll use this time now to talk about it in the context of LIMU, is how do we harvest LIMU? You know, one of the most important things is to never take something in a way that is going to end its life cycle. We want to take it in a way that it's going to continue to grow and reproduce so that we always have a supply of it. And so limu is a very, very easy thing to keep healthy if we harvest it correctly. And what we don't want to ever do is take the holdfast, because if we cut off limu an inch or so above the holdfast and we leave that holdfast on the reef, the limu can grow more. It can keep growing. It's kind of like our hair. You know, if we cut our hair will keep growing. If we yank it out by the roots, then it's not going to come back. I mean, sometimes it does, but you get my point. This is an excerpt here from a little booklet that we put out along with Kua'aina Ulu Awamo, and it was called a Lawai Opono booklet. And Lawai Opono, there's a quote here from Uncle Mac Poi Poi, who you got to see a photo of earlier. And when you ask Uncle Mac, who is a Lawai Opono, what is Lawai Opono, Uncle Mac? Uncle Mac says, it's knowing how something will be replaced before you take it. And that's so profound to think about, yeah? Knowing how something will be replaced before you take it. So in that little booklet that got put out, here's a little example here. When you gather limu, you ako, or you pinch it off. You never hooky or pull off the holdfast so that it will continue to grow. So when you go out and you want to try limu, make sure you pinch it off and you don't yank. Okay, awesome. So just to bring that last little thought here, this is a sprig of sargassum or limukala here, and this person is holding a rock with the holdfast attached. I did not take this photo. I found this picture on the internet, but I use it because don't do that. Okay, don't do that. That's not how. Should have pinched it off up here. Okay, and so this image right here, Malia might recognize this. She was there the day I took this image. So we're going to talk about how limu is seasonal here in a second, but what these black sort of spots that are very flat to the reef, what these are the dormant holdfasts of limu kala.
Wow.
And so if you can see down here how it's kind of starting to grow out of the edges there. So these holdfasts are left on the little pukas where the stem was. That's what these are. You can see it starting to grow here, starting to grow here. We leave that and it can go months like that. It's going to come back and grow back. Okay, so just wanted to share that with you. Okay, so like I mentioned, we're going to talk about how limu is seasonal. So you might have noticed, you know, oh, I remember I went this time of year and had so much limu, and then I went back this time of year and it was all gone. What happened? And so a lot of limu, especially here in Hawaii, is seasonal, meaning that much of our limu species are very hardy and they like rough surf. They like very turbulent action, wave action areas is where a lot of our limu thrives. And so what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the limu specifically that grows here on this reef flat. This reef flat is called Papakaha'o-Hina. It's a beautiful reef flat within the Pūpūkea Marine Life Conservation District. And it has many faces. This is what it looks like in the spring. And this is what it looks like in the winter. And so right now, today, the waves are about 35 feet and it's even, we can't even see this really, it's really pumping today. But this is what it looks like kind of after the winter season in March when the waves are starting to go down. It's kind of been growing all winter through the rough surf. And as you can see, the reef is really blanketed in limu. And then a couple months later, May, you know, just before summer, you can tell it's starting to die back. You know, it's starting to creep more and more towards the edge of the reef. And this is because, you know, the tide is changing, the surf is staying lower, the days are getting a little bit longer. And so everything up here is just too dry to grow. So it starts to shrink back towards the shoreline there. By August, you know, it's just pretty much just what's left in the cracks and in the areas where it's still getting, you know, enough water down here in this puka. But for the most part, everything over here is pau and is gone. But remember, it's not really gone. Yeah, it's just kind of the spores are there. They're hiding. The holdfasts are just down to nothing that you can't really see. And then what happens is once the summer is over and we start to pick up back towards the winter season, for us on the North Shore, the surf starts to kick up around this time, but also the rain starts to kick up around this time. And as you can see, kind of the first thing to come back is our green limu. And that green limu really likes fresh water, really likes freshwater sources. And for us there, it's rain that we get here on the North Shore. And so that's kind of our first indicator. And then the cycle happens all over again, all through the winter season. Like now, it's just super growing, plenty limu. And then it'll be summer and it'll all be gone again. And so when that dieback starts to happen, this is a close-up of some limuli pe'epe'e. And as you can see, it's starting to kind of fade out. Yeah, the sun just starts to drain it. It doesn't get a lot of moisture. So if you see limu, when you go out and it looks white like this, that's what's happening, is it's starting to die back. So it's not it's okay. It's normal that it happens. So let's talk about the limu at Papakaha o Hina. And as you can see in this image here, this is April. And you can see it's just a blanket. Everything is just covered so much. It's Uncle Wally and it's Uncle Bobley now. And so we go out every April and we monitor our limu there on the reef flat. We started doing that in 2015. We've actually documented 35, about give or take 1 or 2 Hawaiian species out on the reef flat. We have 2 introduced or non-native species out there, and we'll talk about those in a minute. We know that the limu there is abundant, both macro, the big stuff we can see, and micro, like the stuff you saw in the photo of the microscope image. It is an example of a healthy ecosystem. And like we talked about, it's seasonal. It's also a wonderful classroom. We love to use the area out there on the reef flat when we can get out there in spring, especially, as a living classroom. And there's one of my most favorite things to do is to take Keiki out there and get them amped on limu too. So sort of the next little generation of limu nerds are being cultivated out here. And we're excited about that. And so something that, here's another image of that reef flat. And so something I wanted to point out, a lot of folks ask, why do you think this area is so good for limu compared to some other areas? And, it is a marine life conservation district. And because of that, there is an ample amount of marine life. And so as you can see here, these little helmet urchins down here, we call those ha'ukeuke. And the ha'ukeuke actually play a very important role seasonally out here on the reef. And if you'll notice where these guys are, the rock is actually clean. It's scraped clean. And what that does is it actually creates space. So when that limu goes through its seasonal cycle and shoots the spores that will become the next season's limu, it has space for those spores to settle and take hold. So in areas where things like urchins, or especially these ha'ukeuke, are over harvested, they're not there to clear the space, so to speak. So when we talk about limu and what it needs to survive, it does need a very balanced ecosystem, because having, that space and having all those things work together is a very important part of the process. So to answer the question, why is it doing so well here? It's because the system is pretty balanced right now. And so that's why. And as you can see here, we actually have multi-generations of ha'ukeuke out here, which is kind of awesome. Okay, so this is an image that I like to just take a moment just to pause on, and we're going to talk about all the different species, or not all, many of the different species that we have out on the reef flat. And so I'm just going to take this moment to check the chat and see if we have any questions. Does anybody have any questions before I move on? I'm checking the chat right now. Okay, no questions? Okay, all right, great. Okay, we're gonna move on. We're doing good. On time too. Wow, we're flying right through. Okay, so beautiful, yeah. All right, so pictures are great, but there's also some very nerdy science people in here. So here you go. Here is a wonderful working list of some of the species of limu that we have. And as you can see, they are separated for you by color. So we have lots of reds, greens, and browns. And the images that are in each one, the limu that you are seeing has the little double asterisks by it. And so that the this one, and we'll go over all of these in a minute, but just so you guys know. So we don't have time to go through this list completely for you here, but just know that we do keep a running list of all the LIMU out there, and every year in April we get together and try to go back through our reflat and see if we can add anything to the list. We find something every time, more things every time, which is exciting. Okay, so when we talk about the LIMU coverage at Pūpūkea-Waimea, something that was important for us to do after we started monitoring it for a while was determining what's the percent cover of LIMU, you know, what's the most abundant, what's the least abundant, what's everything looking like. And so by far, about 40% of the coverage during a seasonal growth spurt is gonna be LIMU kala. And so LIMU kala is this one here, a sargassum. And LIMU kala is a very awesome LIMU. It has so many different uses and it's used for so many different things. If you see this photo up here, this is a picture of a kala fish. LIMU kala makes a great bait to catch the kala fish. This is the LIMU that we spoke about earlier that's used in a conflict resolution ceremony called ho'oponopono. It tastes amazing. I love to eat it. This is also the one that we talked about that has the floats on it that were used in different protection ceremony. It's also a LIMU that is a wonderful habitat for other marine species. If you ever go out on the reef and you lift up LIMU kala, there's so many things that live in there. So LIMU kala is a very exciting LIMU, and I'll take this moment now just to sort of talk about a little bit more about LIMU kala. Along with some others in the LIMU hui, we're hoping to have the legislature this session actually name LIMU kala as the Hawaii State LIMU. So fingers crossed. Malia's been helping so much with that. And you know, we have a state bird and a state tree and a state flower, and we don't have a state LIMU. So we're hopeful, fingers crossed, and we'll put out some information if it gets picked up and there's a hearing, you know, where people can provide testimony in support. We'll definitely put that information out on social media, so you folks are welcome to, you know, let the ledge know that we're in support. So here's some other pictures of LIMU kala, and talking about, you know, you can really start to see the abundance on the reef flat. And so these are my feet over here, and I call it the kala carpet when it does this, and it's just so much LIMU kala. And each one of those sprigs can be like, at peak growth, is like over a foot long, like a foot and a half, some of them. It's just really, really, really beautiful. Okay. What's cool about Pūpūkea-Waimea is there's actually 4 native species, endemic species of LIMU kala, and we have all of them out on the reef flat. Here's 3 of them here, pictures that we took, and actually, Malia, you were there with us. This was just this last April when we pulled all of these to take little samples of, and so these are 3 of the endemic species of kala that we have out there. So different, but so beautiful, yeah? Okay. Okay, so back to this image, and we'll keep revisiting this so that we can get reminded of what we're talking about. The sort of next section, if we were to take all of the other native LIMU out here and put them all together, with the exception of these that we'll talk about in a minute, it makes up about 30% of the coverage there. And so we can talk about some of these. We'll go through them, you know, we won't spend a whole million years on here. Usually what happens is folks want to know which ones they can eat, right? And I'll just take this opportunity to let you know that all LIMU is edible, but not all LIMU has good texture or tastes good. So it's kind of up to you to decide what you like. There are certain LIMU that aren't typically LIMU that people like to eat, but I like to eat them. There's some LIMU that is everybody's favorite, but I don't like to eat them. So we're all different in our ono for LIMU. So definitely get to know which ones you like. And we'll talk about some that pretty much nobody likes and why when we get there. But this one is one that is especially ono. I am not a phycologist, just so you guys know, and all of the scientific names I am not the best at pronouncing. So I'm just gonna give that disclaimer now, but I'm gonna say it like I know. but don't quote me on it. Okay, so Bachocladia scotsburgii. I don't know the Hawaiian name for this one. If anybody knows, we would love to know. If you know the Hawaiian name, let me know. But this one likes to grow in the cracks and the crevices in the shade. So it's not one that's just like out on top of a reef. Like you really gotta, stick your head in and look. But it tastes like caviar. It's really, really, oh no. And down here on the bottom left, just so you guys know, we have put what color that limu in the book can be found in, the pigment color. Yeah, just so you guys know. This is another one. We're not 100% sure exactly which it is, but it's one of the Leogora species. Now, this one, you don't want to eat this one. And I'll tell you why. Some limu, like coral, remember we talked about how coral was the plant and then the calcium carbonate, the rock, the hard part. Well, some limu produces that too. And so this is one of those sort of coral producing, or not coral, but calcium carbonate producing limu, coralline algae, we call them. And so you see where it's turning white? As it ages, what happens is that calcium carbonate kind of part of the plant will stay when the soft tissue part of the plant dies back or gets old. And so as these limu break down, they actually are sand contributors. They actually help to make sand. So the ones that have the calcium carbonate in them are typically ones that don't, the texture is junk and they don't taste good. So don't recommend eating them unless you like it really, really, really extra crunchy. Okay, so this one, Nuspora minima or Vavahiva'a, or Kaupau in some places, a really nice limu. I don't know too many people who eat this one a whole lot. I don't know, Malia, do you know anybody who eats this one? You eat that one? Okay.
It tastes like mountain apple to me.
Oh, I'm gonna look at that one in a whole new way now. I'm gonna have to try that one. I've heard it's really good, like cooked in stew, like cooked, but I have to try that now. So this one is nice and abundant in the MLCD. This one, poha poha. This is a very hard knobby limu. If you felt it, it's hard to the touch. It doesn't get tall. It stays pretty flat to the surface. I don't know anybody who eats this one. These little pukas inside, it's very porous. And so you can actually smush it down and the cavities inside are hollow. And that's where it gets its name actually. And same with this one, puha, which is another sort of hollow limu on the reef flat. This one is a halimeda or halimeda. This one is another one of those that are sand makers. So as you can see here where it's starting to turn white, there's actually, when you find beds of halimeda, if you look at the bottom, below them, there's a bunch of white flakes of this limu there where it's already down to its calcium carbonate form. Really beautiful. I call this one the fish tank limu because it looks like a fake plastic one that you find in the fish tank. Okay, Kalerpa. This is one that everybody loves to eat. And so there's at least two kinds that we have out on the reef flat, the macrophysa and the racemosa. And you can see those here. Awesome. They taste really good. Super ono. This one is the Gradolopia fukuensis or limune. And so this one is also, depending on, just so you guys know, the names that we're sharing with you are names that have been shared with me, but in different places, they have different names for these limus. So just know that there's more, the information that we're giving you today is not all of the information. So I just want to put that out there. Okay, this one is a very popular limu for very many people. This one is vavaiole or rat's foot. And so many people love to eat this one. I bet Malia, I bet you like this one. Kirk, you like this one too? Yeah. So my memories of this one would be to always see it in the icebox in a jar, pickled, sort of with onion or tomato or both, and vinegar. Yeah, that's how a lot of people like to eat this one. It grows very matted and low to the reef. And this is one that you have to be very careful when you're picking it because it's very easy to accidentally take the hold fast because its hold fast is it's kind of a low lying limu. So just know if you go to gather this one, just be real careful with the way that you gather it. Okay, this is a really beautiful limu. This is an alani. So neat and iridescent under the water. This one looks kind of like electric under the water. Kind of papery in my opinion. I'm not a fan of eating this one. Just the texture is kind of papery. Yeah, I don't know anybody who eats this one. This is another type of alani. Same family, but a little bit different. And this image here is actually a seasonal bed that pops up in Waimea Bay. So this is Waimea Bay. And in the summertime, about halfway out into the bay, there's this huge, large, vast bed of this alani. And this one is really pretty. It actually is like, it grows like a corkscrew, like a spiral. It's really, really pretty. And underwater, it just kind of flows like this. And it's so, so pretty. Again, one that isn't really eaten by us anyway. But if you're ever in the bay in the summer, go snorkel about halfway out and about 20 feet down, you'll see these seasonal beds of alani. Okay, then we have just some other things, hulu ilio, or these, there's a whole bunch of those hulu ilios. It's these little turf algae. We have this one, which is a really interesting one that is a reddish furry limu. Nobody eats it, and then it sort of gets this other limu growth on top of it. The green is like another kind of a turf type algae that grows on top of it. If you're ever out, you know, try to look for this one. You can touch it. It feels like velvet is what it feels like. Then there's these little guys that kind of stick up by themselves. They're really tiny. It's the Neomeris annulata. And that's just what they look like. They just these one little, just like that. They get about, I don't know, an inch or two high. And they just do that. This is a really interesting one here, huna, the type of hypnea. And this is not to be confused with the invasive one, which we'll talk about. But this is a really sort of more on the rare side of a native that we have out on the reef flat called huna. This is Hydroclathurus clathratus, or Swiss cheese, as some people call it. I particularly love the way this limu looks. Again, we don't eat it. It's very weird texture, but it sure is pretty. This one is a Laurencia McDermotti, or a Mane'oneo. And this is that red that we tricked you with the photo earlier. This one tastes delicious, by the way. This picture right here, I just have to point out this picture. And this is one of my learning moments and one of my most favorite memories. Actually, we're on the island of Kauai, and it's Auntie Pam over here. And this is Carla. And Carla's super cool. She's a limu nerd, and I had met her a couple of times, but I got to hang out with her on Kauai, and we were in the water and we were looking at limu, and I pop up with this handful of this Laurencia, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Carla, look at this one. And Carla starts bust laughing because it's named after Carla. Carla is actually the phycologist who identified this species, and it was subsequently named after her. You can't name a limu after yourself, so it was actually Dr. Isabella Abbott who named the limu, this Laurencia McDermotti, after Carla McDermott, which is where the name comes from. So we had a really good laugh that day, which was super fun. This one is my husband's favorite limu to eat. This is his favorite one. He always looks for this one on the reef and gets all excited and knows when he looks in the book that he has to not look in the green section to find it. This is the one he knows, but it tastes super, super good. It's crunchy and has really good flavor. So speaking of Carla, this limu right here is a super, super rare limu. I've only found it once, and this is a picture of the one time I found it. So what I'm showing you a picture of here, the Bishop Museum Press has these limu cards. They're like greeting cards, and you can buy them in a pack. And on the back of the card, it has some really cool information. And so I had found this limu one time, and I took the pictures of it, and this is my hand, and this is actually under the water, because when I brought it out of the water to look at it, it turns into nothing. And so I was like, that's such a weird, trippy limu. And then somebody gave me these cards, and I was going through it, and I saw this image, and I was like, hey, that's the limu that I found at Sharks Cove at Kapo'o. And so I flipped the card over where it has all the information, and sure enough, Carla, she was a then graduate student, actually discovered this limu at Pūpūkea at Sharks Cove at Kapo'o in 1983. And here's the name of it. And so, and it does say here, it's so rare that they may be seen and collected by divers only once in one dive. And then the plants disappear. They're usually so gooey that they feel slimy, but leave no residue as they slip through your fingers. So I just wanted to point out that I actually found that one. And so we were able to add that to our list, and I've never seen it again. I've heard stories every year. Somebody tells me they've seen it. So if anybody sees it, we want to know, but there you go. How cool is that? So thanks, Carla. Awesome. This is another kind of rare one. We get it just, you know, a little bit in the MLCD out on the reef flat. This one is kind of similar to another species that we'll talk about, but a little bit different, a little more of a broad leaf. And this one has a little story over here. It's associated with the shark aumakua and said to explain the green color on some sharks. And those protected by mano as their aumakua do not eat this limu, this pakea. So another green limu that we have, not a whole lot on the reef flat, but very nearby, is LA. And so LA is a type of ulva as well. And this, you know, we talked about how it needs fresh water. So after the rains, you're really going to see a lot of the green. And so Malia and I have walked this shoreline a couple of times now together. And so Malia, this is what it looked like a couple weeks ago. It's just covered in all this limu LA. So we throw this one in. We do get it in the on the reef flat, Papakaha'ohina, but these pictures are from further down because it's just a cooler picture. And it's a very good one to eat. It's super, super ono. It tastes really, really good. So that was sort of all the ones that fall into this category. So the next category we have here that makes up quite a large percent, about, you know, 15, 13% or so, are these non-native species. And so we actually have two non-native species out on the reef flat. One we call hookweed. And you can tell it's hookweed because it has these telltale little hooks at the end of the blades. And that is a very well thought out biological process. It lets it latch on to other limu and it can grow on top of it. So it's kind of a monster in that way, kind of creepy. And then the other one is the prickly limu. And so as you can see, this one has like, well, it's prickly. It feels, you know, hard and prickly when you touch it. And so that's where the common name of that one comes from. And these two out on the reef flat are actually, you know, I'm not going to use the word invasive because they're not acting invasive yet. They're not dominant, but they are a species that we don't want to grow out there. We would like to keep the reef flat out there predominantly native and a healthy environment for native limu out there. So we'll talk about that in a second. We'll go back to that in a second. So this next category here are these four here: pepeau, loloa, palahalaha, and kahili, kind of make up the next category of percentages. And so that's these. This is pepeau. This one isn't one of those sand makers. You don't want to eat this guy. This is one of the first limu to come back after the seasonal dieback starts to blanket the reef. The loloa, or the honu, limu honu, some folks call it, this bright red. Turtles do like to eat this one. And funny story, out on the North Shore, we have so many sea turtles. And sometimes when they eat a lot of this limu, and they'll come up on the beach to thermoregulate, and they'll actually throw up after eating this limu, and it looks like blood. And we get so many calls about turtles in distress, where all these people think that these turtles are dying, that they're throwing up blood, but really they've just stuffed themselves with so much loloa that they can't handle, and they need to burp it up when they're on the beach. It looks crazy when it happens though. But this one is a really beautiful hardy limu, one of my favorites to look at. Not one of my favorites to eat, but definitely one of my favorites to look at. And then palahalaha is very similar to that one we showed you earlier. Some people call it lettuce limu, or also limu honu in some places. The turtles like to eat this one too. Very bright green, likes fresh water, grows very well out on the reef flat as well. And then the last one was limu kahili. And so this is a really knobby, hard limu. Not a very popular for limu for eating, but I will tell you, I love to eat this one. That's one of my ultimate favorites, actually. This is one of my top 5 limu to eat out on the reef flat. So I love it because it's crunchy and it has a really good flavor. So yeah, that's those. So finally, we get back here to this picture, and the smallest percentage, we're talking 3 and 2% of the entire coverage out here, are limu kohu and limu li pe'epe'e. And I point this out because within the Pūpūkea Marine Life Conservation District, there are some exceptions to the rules. One of those exceptions is you're permitted to take and possess up to 2 pounds combined total squeeze dry of limu kohu and limu li pe'epe'e by hand harvest only, provided the limu's holdfast is left in place. So we're going to talk about these 2 species really quick. Limu kohu, okay, Asparagopsis taxiformis. Okay, very popular limu, very, very popular limu, the ultimate favorite of many. And this limu is very feathery. And so, as you saw in that rule exception, you can have 2 pounds of this per person per day squeezed dry. So the squeeze dry is really the kicker there, because when you squeeze dry limu kohu, it pretty much goes down to almost nothing. Yeah, it's a very frilly, feathery limu, so there's not a lot of body to it. So the point is, it takes a whole lot to get to 2 pounds of limu kohu squeeze dry. It's a vast amount of limu, and as you saw in the percentage, it's the least amount one that we have. And so to add to that, part of the time when it's seasonal, it's actually reproducing. And so we never want to take limu when that limu is reproducing. So you see these little cystocarps, that's those little reproductive spore areas that we were talking about in the beginning. And limu kohu does this. And so if we're allowed to take 2 pounds per person squeeze dry, and during its season, half of that time we shouldn't take any because it's reproducing. The point that I'm trying to make is we don't have that much out there. If someone were to come out and take 2 pounds of limu kohu, there would be no limu kohu. Okay, so I'm just informing you guys about the limu kohu out there. And the same thing with the limu li pe'epe'e. Now this one is a little hardier and it doesn't squeeze down as much, so it doesn't take as much to reach 2 pounds, but it's also the limu that we have the least of out on the reef. And it's very limu li pe'epe'e chondrophycus is a limu that grows under the other limu. Yeah, it's kind of hidden. In fact, that's what it means. In fact, limu li pe'epe'e would not be consumed by hula dancers, because the idea is that it's the hidden limu, and that secrets of hula would become hidden from any hula dancer that consumed it. And so this one, because it does grow lower and in the cracks, it's just harder to find. It's not a big, broad limu. And so it's very interesting that the 2 limu that we have sort of the least amount of are the ones that are allowed for take. I'm just opening the chat really fast. Oh, thank you. Okay. And so having said that, however, this is my ultimate favorite limu to eat. Of all the limu li pe'epe'e is my personal favorite. And so I can tell you, I have never gone and taken 2 pounds of limu li pe'epe'e total from anywhere, much less Papakaha o Hina. So talking about lawai opono and ethical harvest of the limu is very, very important. And we can touch on that in a little while when we talk story. So back to those introduced species. Because it is a marine life conservation district, we have to have a special activities permit from DAR to remove those non-native species, which we've had for years now. And so what we do is we actually get out on the reef flat on our hands and our knees, and we hand pull by the hold fast. That's an intentional hold fast take of these 2 non-native limu, the prickly and the hookweed. And we do that so that they do not become invasive on the reef flat. And so that's the 2 we're talking about, the prickly, the Acanthophora spicifera, and the Hypnea muciformis. We're making it up as we go. It's the hookweed. And so we pull these 2, and what we do with them, like I said, is we actually pick through and just take those. So we have to know the natives really well in order to do this process. But this is what a before looks like. And this is the same exact spot after. So if you see this little kind of moon-shaped piece of sand there. That's it there. And so you can see what it looks like after those LIMU have been taken out. And then we leave the native ones. And so it's arduous work. It's love. It's a labor of love, but it happens. And what we do with the LIMU that we take is we actually bring it up off site. We have a coastal restoration program at and around Kapo'o where we've removed invasive weeds and shrubs, and we've replanted native Hawaiian coastal plants in an effort to reduce erosion to help save coral, because coral needs sunlight and we don't want a bunch of mud on it from erosion. And so we actually take the LIMU up and we compost it out to add nutrients to the soil where we propagate the plants. And then once those plants are mature enough, we take them back down to the shoreline where we plant them back into the coastal restoration project area. So it's kind of full circle, which is nice. So we get to take it off the reef and actually bring some nutrients back into the soil. And so I just want to talk about, why do we do that? What's the point? We said, well, we don't want it to take hold. So what does that look like when it takes hold? And so we'll talk for a minute about what happens when LIMU goes wrong. And so this is an image. If anybody has been to the island of Molokai, this is the road that goes out to the harbor, to the wharf, the Kaunakakai wharf here. And so this is where the canoe club keeps their canoes. And I want you to notice this stretch of beach right here. Okay, so all of this out here, this is all gorilla ogo. Okay. So gorilla ogo is not something we have on Papaka'ahina, thank goodness. But I'm using this as an example to show you what happens when LIMU goes wrong, okay? And it is going wrong in many places throughout our islands. And so this is an aerial image. All this brown you see is gorilla ogo. So again, remember this beach here, because now I'm gonna show you a different angle. So this is what we're talking about, this grassel area, this gorilla ogo. So here's the beach that I was just having you look at where the canoe club is. So what happens is all that ogo that was out in the water, it gets washed up. And so this is just a giant thick mat of gorilla ogo all on the beach there. And when it's out here, it's preventing anything else from growing. All the native LIMU cannot grow under here. It does become good habitat for certain fish that, like to hang out in there, but it definitely creates an imbalance in the ecosystem. So what they're doing over there on Molokai is they're actually harvesting this up. Look how much it is. It's so much in just this one small spot. They bag as much as they can, and then they take it out to use it as compost. And so LIMU, one of the things that is important when we remove our LIMU is our permit says we have to put it in a biosecure container. And the reason is because many species of LIMU, if you break off a piece, that piece can actually grow more LIMU. And so in the case of gorilla ogo, it's very prolific in that way as well. And so it just seems like a never-ending battle. But if anybody's interested in, removal efforts around the islands, there's lots of places that are really trying to remove some of these invasive LIMUs. And there's many kinds out there, it's not just gorilla ogo. But just so you guys know, it is happening and it's very important. Another thing that's very important too is in these areas where this stuff gets cleared out is to replant natives in their place. And so there are a lot of efforts around the islands as well to do LIMU restoration. So not something that we have to do out here in the Pūpūkea Marine Life Conservation District, but there are lots of shorelines and lots of places where LIMU restoration is really taking place and really happening and actually really being successful. We have our friend Kirk on here, and Kirk is out as part of the Waimanalo LIMU Hui, and Waimanalo is doing really well with restoration of LIMU. Kirk, you want to tell us a couple of minutes about what you guys are doing, or how it's going, I should say?
We feed fish is what we do in Waimanalo. Now we've been planting LIMU and making LIMU lace, braiding LIMU that's grown in tanks, and planting it as in just tying it to Oahu and placing it into the ocean outside of Waimanalo, in the hopes that it can grow whole fast, or its spores will spread through the bay and get passed somewhere and grow over there wherever it grows. And we've been doing this since 2016, 2017. And majority of the lace that we plant, if we go back the next day, the fishes and the hornus just wipe out the LIMU in the lace, which isn't a bad thing because the LIMU that we plant is spore rich, so there's plenty spores on it, hoping with us is that the fish eat it and then they go poop it out and the spores get pooped out along with that and then get spread through the current in that kind of action.
Awesome. Thank you, Kirk. Yeah, see, so it's all a part, it's all connected and all a part of the system. Oh, excuse me. Okay, so to wrap this up, things to remember. So LIMU is the basis of the food chain. It's a habitat for many marine creatures and a healthy ecosystem indicator. Provides us with about 75% of the oxygen we breathe, is an important source of food, medicine, and is used in many ceremony. And finally, the most important thing is LIMU is fun. And so it's really hard to find anybody dealing with LIMU that does not have a smile on their face. And so I will leave you with these pictures of very happy people enjoying LIMU so much. It's so good fun. You might recognize some of these faces, but I've been really lucky to share my love for LIMU with so many people all across the Pai'aina. So yeah, that's the end of our presentation. So what I would like to, yeah, Uncle Teddy, I know, right? This is Uncle Teddy right here. And he actually passed away. Gosh, it hasn't even been a year yet, right, Kirky, that Uncle Teddy passed away. But this assignment here was really funny. We were having to use tweezers to take the epiphytic growth of LIMU off of other LIMU. And so these uncles were complaining that they needed their glasses in order to do it, but they were having good fun while they were doing it. It was so fun. This is Kimmy Werner. I don't know how many of you guys know Kimmy, and this is her son, Buddy. And we had collected some LIMU this day, and we were hoping to take photos of it, but Buddy ate it all. Me as well, right? And we're like, oh, Buddy ate all the LIMU. It's Auntie Pam, Auntie Vanny, some of our cakeys. So yeah, good fun, LIMU. Okay, I'm gonna stop my share and bring us back. And so I just wanted to go through and see if anybody has any questions at all about LIMU. Yeah, go for it, Kirk.
I have 3.
Yes, go for it.
So my first question is, for LIMU kala in Ho'oponopono ceremonies, do you know if they use a specific type of LIMU kala or just any kind of LIMU kala? Because up there you guys see 3 different kinds, yeah? I think Waimanalo we've seen 3. I think the same 3 in our type pools down here. So I was wondering if it's if you know of if it's a specific type of kala or if it's just all of them.
So as far as I'm not sure. I know how it's used in this ceremony. There's 2 different ways that I've been taught that it goes, and then we'll ask Malia to it after I give my explanation if Malia might know. And so the 2 ways that I know of it being used is, one, there would be a lei po'o made out of kala, and as part of the ceremony, at one point you would go into the water, and as you get deeper in the water, the lei is lifted off your head, and as it floats away, it symbolizes or represents that the pilikia is gone or lifted or pau. And then the other way is that it gets eaten. Some of the blade gets eaten. But I'm not sure if any species works or if it has to be a specific, like if the lepo'o is only a certain species or the eating is a specific species. I'm not sure. Malia, do you know by chance?
No, I don't know.
If anybody here knows, let us know. Yeah, I'm not sure. But I think that those kinds of questions, Kirk, would be really good for us to, start maybe keeping track of. Yeah, Malia, maybe we can reach out to the hui and some of the kupuna and try, that's such a good question. We should know the answer to that.
Yeah, I know, because I always talk about using it in ceremony and that it's used in Ho'oponopono ceremony, and then it just never clicked to me until you had those 3 pictures next to each other. Is it a specific kind or is it all kinds,
Which one? Well, I asked, there's a Lavaita out here that likes to come and take LIMU kala to use as bait. And I was like, okay, Brana, it's protected over here and I'm supposed to take the LIMU kala from here, but which one's the best one for the fishing? And he said the fish don't discriminate, that they whatever, all 3, they eat all 3. So I wonder. Okay, what's your second question, Kurt?
My second question is, it's not a LIMU that you talked about, but LIMU lipoa. And so you talked about how not to pick with the hold fast and you leave the hold fast, but then when LIMU lipoa washes up, it washes up with its hold fast. Do you know how come?
So that's a really good question. And I have heard the answer to that from Uncle Wally, because I've asked him that. I actually have that one in my slide. I could pop it up just so you guys can, I'll put it up just so you guys can see what LIMU we're talking about. We don't get too much of it out here, but we were asking Uncle Wally that same question. And he thinks that what happens is there's some chemical trigger that triggers the LIMU to let go itself. So it kind of does it on its own. And that's why it just washes up all of them with the hold fast like that. So yeah, that's the only answer I've heard, is that Uncle Wally thinks that there's a chemical trigger that tells it to just go.
Also, then when that chemical trigger happens, they probably already like release their spores, and the next is ready for calm, so they already did their job of making sure that they reproduce.
And that's why it all comes up at the same time. Yeah. Like,
okay.
You guys get a lot at once out there.
We get a lot at once.
Like,
yeah.
So
we get the whole mat.
Yeah. I love it. I wish we had more out here. I actually love limu lipoa. It's so strong. It's so
strong. My freezer smells like it. Everything in my freezer has a little tinge of lipoa in it. Like, we gotta make sure we don't put certain stuff inside of that freezer, because we know you get limu in that freezer. Okay, my last question. When you're talking about the honu eating the limu honu, and then that they barf up whatever, some of the extra limu that they don't eat and stuff, has anybody ever like took like samples of what like that barf, that hoop is, that snot and all of that kind of stuff? And I only think about it because I was just in a conversation about how whale snot is like used as a protection for the maninis. Does I don't know, I'm just curious if you know if like the turtle snot has any like thing like that. I don't know if a protection for that, but also just like bring in more nutrients from what they eat and stuff, and then they put it in the area that they're at after it washes away. Like, does it go anywhere? I don't know.
Yeah.
I was just curious.
Yeah. I love the way your brain works, Kurt. So in my experience, when the honu throw up the limu that they're eating, it's literally just the ground up bits of what they ate. There's no like mucus sac or anything that keeps it together. So if it happens in the water, which we've seen it happen many times when we're in the water, it just dissolves all out like particles that just settle. And then on the beach, because there's seawater in with it, it just kind of comes out like a red or green, depending on what they're eating, but just like palu, it just kind of is what it is. And it doesn't have any sort of a texture to it that would make like a space for something else to rely on it for protection or safety, like how the whale stuff does for the juvenile of the manini. So yeah, I don't know enough about it to really have a definitive answer, but in my experience, that's what I've seen. I've also seen it happen with turtles when they eat fish. And, we all hear stories that they're herbivores. They only eat limu. There is some kolohe little turtles out there, and I have seen them go into the bait balls and eat fish, chew up and spit out bones. So yeah, so they're kind of pukey little things. They really upchuck a lot. So but yeah, when it's that red limu, it looks like it was a murder scene or something on the beach. It is like red, and the turtle of course is like totally asleep, like just loving life.
Yeah. I don't know, I was just curious because our turtles in Waimanalo don't chill on the beach. They're never chilling on the beach like the ones up there. So I'm just curious, like you guys can see it. I mean, turtles gonna throw up inside the ocean, I guarantee you, just and then it just gets like that. But I don't know. Like,
it does. It's kind of like you know how uhu poop disperses the second it happens? It's kind of like that. It just comes out and disperses. Yeah. Whereas that whale stuff is like it stays together. It's like the mucus is holding it together. See how deep we go, guys, in LIMU Science Talk Stories? About all kinds of really cool stuff. I love it. Okay, any other questions? Don't be shy now. Any kind of question is an okay question. Oh, awesome. Okay. Okay, if there are no more questions, don't be shy, but we can pow early. We had blocked 2 hours, but we got through it in just an hour and a half. And so, yeah, I'll hang out and see if there's any more questions. But I just wanted to mahalo everybody for spending their time with us. We did record this, so once we end it, we'll switch it over to a YouTube link and we'll make that link available so you can share it with anybody who might be interested in going through what we went through today. And I just want to say mahalo to Mālama Pūpūkea-Waimea and to Kua Aina Ulu Awamo and the LIMU Hui and Malia and Kirk. So mahalo nui for everybody being here today. Mahalo nui. Okay.
Mahalo nui.
Mahalo, have a great weekend.